Her late husband, Prince Philip, who passed away in April, spent much time at Wood Farm after he stepped down from his public duties back in 2017. The royal family has also traditionally spent Christmas and New Year's at the estate since 1988, according to the royals' website.
Princess Anne has finally spoken. For years, one question quietly haunted royal watchers. Why did Prince Philip, the man who stood beside Queen Elizabeth II for over 7 decades, choose to live miles away from her in his final years? Not a palace, not a castle, a modest 5-bedroom farmhouse. The tabloids had theories, the public had questions. But Princess Anne, she stayed silent until now. What she's revealed cuts through decades of speculation and exposes a truth far more powerful than any rumor. A truth about duty, devotion, and a love that needed no walls to survive. This isn't the story you think you know. Stay with us because what Princess Anne just revealed will completely change how you see their marriage. The daughter who watched it all. Princess Anne turned 73 in August 2023. She has spent her entire life watching her parents not as the public saw them, and were standing together at balconies and state events, but as two real people who loved each other in a way that didn't always look like love from the outside. She grew up inside that marriage. She saw the early mornings and the quiet evenings. She saw the arguments and the silences, the duty and the devotion. She watched her father, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.
The Duke of Edinburgh and his Duchess soon settled into married life. Their first 2 children, Charles and then Anne, were born.
Give up a career he loved, a naval career he was genuinely brilliant at, to spend his life walking behind a woman who would become the most photographed person on earth. And she watched her mother carry the weight of the crown every single day, with Philip always nearby, always steady, never asking for credit. Princess Anne was there when her father packed his things and moved into Wood Farm, a quiet 5-bedroom cottage tucked into a secluded corner of the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. She saw it happen. She understood why. But the world outside those gates did not. For years, as the press painted the story as distance, coldness, or worse, the slow collapse of a royal marriage, Princess Anne said nothing. That silence, she later explained, was intentional. She once told a close associate that some things are better protected by quiet, that not every question deserves an answer just because it's being asked loudly. The British press had a way of turning ordinary human decisions into scandals, and Anne had watched that happen to her family too many times to feed it willingly. So she stayed quiet. She attended her public duties. She gave nothing away. But then September 2022 arrived. Queen Elizabeth II died at Balmoral Castle on the 8th. She was 96 years old.
Queen Elizabeth died at Balmoral Castle, her beloved summer home in Scotland.
The grief that swept across Britain and across much of the world was unlike anything the country had seen in decades. People who had never met her stood in queues for 14 hours to file past her coffin. Grown men wept in the streets, and in the middle of all that grief, the questions started again. Why did Philip live apart from her? Was their marriage really what it appeared? What was the truth behind those final years? The answers circulating in documentaries, books, and late-night online debates were almost always incomplete. Some were flatly wrong. And for Princess Anne, watching strangers construct a version of her parents' marriage out of speculation and tabloid memory, something shifted. She began to speak, not in a dramatic sit-down interview with cameras rolling, not in a memoir designed to settle scores, but in quiet, considered conversations with royal biographers and through carefully chosen moments in public appearances. A word here, a clarification there. What she revealed wasn't scandalous. It wasn't the bombshell the press had been waiting for. It was something far harder to package into a headline and far more true. It was about 2 people, a Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth II, who had spent over 70 years building a partnership that worked precisely because it didn't follow anyone else's rules. A marriage that the rest of the world was never fully equipped to understand because they were always looking at it from the outside. Anne had been on the inside the whole time. A marriage nobody fully saw. Let's go back to the beginning. Yes, because none of this makes sense without understanding what Philip and Elizabeth actually signed up for when they married in November 1947. Philip was 26, Elizabeth was 21. It was a cold London morning, and Westminster Abbey was packed with people who had spent years living through war rationing and national exhaustion. The wedding felt like a breath of fresh air for a country that desperately needed one. But behind the pageantry, what was actually happening was far more complicated. Philip was a prince of Greece and Denmark with no country to return to, no throne of his own, and a future that would permanently place him one step behind a woman who would one day become the most powerful monarch on earth. He knew this walking in. He chose it anyway. He gave up his naval career, something he genuinely excelled at, to take on the role of royal consort. By 1952, he had risen to the rank of lieutenant commander and was on track for significant command. Well, people who served with him said he was a natural leader, decisive, sharp, the kind of officer other officers respected without being told to. He walked away from all of it when Elizabeth became queen. For a man like Philip, fiercely independent, intellectually curious, used to having authority and using it, the shift to permanent second place was not a comfortable adjustment. There were moments, well documented by those close to the family, where the frustration showed. He was not a man built for silence and compliance, yet that is largely what the role demanded, and he delivered it for 7 decades straight. He walked 3 paces behind Elizabeth at public events. He completed more than 22,000 solo public engagements across his years of service.
He's carried out more than 22,000 solo engagements and more than 600 overseas visits.
He sat through thousands of state dinners, official ceremonies, and formal reception events where his job was essentially to be present without overshadowing. He showed up every single time, without complaint, at least not publicly. But here is what most people never look closely enough to notice. Philip and Elizabeth never had a conventional marriage to begin with, not from day one. When they moved into Clarence House in 1949, their first shared home, they had separate bedrooms, adjacent rooms, connected by a door, but separate. To modern eyes, that might seem cold. In the context of British aristocratic culture, it was entirely normal. Lady Pamela Hicks, so Philip's own cousin and a lady-in-waiting to Elizabeth, explained it plainly in her 2012 biography. The upper class had always maintained separate sleeping quarters. It was practical, better sleep, personal space, and the freedom to choose closeness rather than having it imposed by default. You could share a room when you wanted to. You had your own space when you needed it. Philip and Elizabeth kept this arrangement from their wedding night in 1947 through to Philip's death in 2021. Every royal residence, Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Balmoral and Sandringham. So when Philip moved to Wood Farm in 2017, he wasn't stepping back from Elizabeth. He wasn't signaling the end of anything. He was simply extending the same logic that had governed their entire marriage, that 2 people can remain deeply connected without being in the same room or even the same building. Princess Anne has confirmed this in her quiet, direct way. When the separate bedrooms, the personal independence, the space within the marriage, it was never a crack in the foundation. It was the foundation. Wood Farm, his world, his rules. If you've never heard of Wood Farm, you wouldn't be alone. It doesn't appear in tourist guides. It isn't featured in royal calendars or photographed at state events. No crowds gather outside its gates. No plaques mark its significance. It sits quietly on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, a comfortable, low-key cottage overlooking the sea. Grade 2 listed, meaning it carries some historical protection, but nothing about it announces itself. Drive past it, and you might assume it belongs to a retired school teacher or a countryside solicitor. You would never guess it became the chosen home of a man who had spent 70 years at the center of the British monarchy. 5 bedrooms, simple furnishings, staff who wore no uniforms. Prince Philip chose it deliberately, and the choosing itself says something. When he officially retired from public duties in August 2017 at the age of 96 after completing more than 22,000 solo engagements,
Buckingham Palace, but this is the last time he'll carry out a solo royal engagement.
he had options. Buckingham Palace, with its 775 rooms, was available. Windsor Castle, grand and steeped in centuries of royal history, was available. Sandringham House itself, the main estate building that his family had used for generations, was available. He picked the cottage 2 miles down the road. Not the palace, not the castle, the cottage. That decision was not accidental. Philip had always had a complicated relationship with the formality of palace life. The schedules, the staff, the protocol, the constant sense of being observed. He had tolerated all of it for decades because duty required it. But duty was finished now. At 96, with his public service behind him, he had earned the right to live exactly as he pleased. And what pleased him was simplicity. Once he arrived at Wood Farm, he made it entirely his own. He oversaw the installation of a new kitchen, designed to his specifications. He hung his own watercolor paintings on the walls, art he had made himself, a hobby he had rarely had time for during his decades of active service. He redesigned rooms to suit how he actually wanted to use them, not how protocol suggested they should be arranged. A truffle farm reportedly ran on the grounds. Friends came and went without formal invitation cards or scheduled arrival times. Conversations happened around a kitchen table rather than in gilded drawing rooms. There is one detail about Wood Farm that tends to stop people when they hear it for the first time. At Buckingham Palace, Queen Elizabeth II had a staff of roughly 200 people managing her daily needs. Every meal was prepared, presented, and cleared away by trained household staff. That was the world she lived in for most of her adult life. At Wood Farm, she cooked. When Elizabeth visited Philip, which she did regularly, far more often than the press gave her credit for, she would prepare meals in that new kitchen he had installed. She would wash the dishes afterward. The Queen of England, washing dishes. It sounds almost impossible given everything we know about royal life. But that is precisely the point. Wood Farm was not royal life in the way the public understood it. It was something rarer than ordinary life, chosen freely by two people who rarely got to be ordinary. Princess Anne has spoken about the cottage with real warmth, describing it as the place her father was most himself in his final independent years. Not because it was luxurious, it wasn't, but because it was genuinely his. He had built it around his own needs and preferences, without compromise or committee. After a lifetime of walking behind someone else, suppressing his instincts, and bending to the demands of an institution older than any individual within it, Wood Farm gave Prince Philip something that palaces, for all their grandeur, could never offer: the freedom to simply exist. He read for hours without interruption. He painted without an audience. He wrote long letters to friends. He had people over for dinner without a single item on the agenda. And Elizabeth came to him in that space. She stepped into his world rather than asking him to return to hers. That, more than anything, is what their arrangement at Wood Farm actually represented. Not distance, not decline. Two people deep into their 90s who had found the one place where they could be together without the weight of everything they carried everywhere else. The truth behind the tabloids. The British tabloids, to put it gently, are not known for restraint. They never have been. There is a long and well-documented history of the British press taking the private lives of the royal family and feeding them through a machine designed to produce drama, regardless of whether drama actually exists. Marriages become crises, absences become estrangements, silence becomes guilt. So when news spread in 2017 that Prince Philip had moved to Wood Farm while Elizabeth remained at Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, the machine started up almost immediately. The headlines were predictable. Royal marriage in crisis. Philip and Elizabeth living apart at 95. The secret divide in Britain's most famous marriage. One tabloid ran a photograph of Wood Farm's exterior alongside a photo of Buckingham Palace. The two images placed side by side as if the distance between them was evidence of something broken. These headlines were read by millions. They were also almost entirely wrong. The actual explanation required no scandal, no secret source, and no dramatic revelation. It was straightforward enough that, once stated plainly, it became almost embarrassing that it needed explaining at all. And Elizabeth was still queen. That meant she had duties fixed, non-negotiable, continuous duties that required her physical presence in London. Every week she met with the Prime Minister. That meeting did not move to Norfolk because it was more convenient for her husband. State business, investitures, receptions, Privy Council meetings, audiences with foreign dignitaries. The machinery of the monarchy operates on a schedule that bends for no one, not even the woman at its center. Our Philip had no such obligations. He had retired.
Today we've had the official announcement of the retirement of the Duke of Edinburgh.
After 22,000 solo public engagements spanning 65 years of active service, his diary was finally empty. There was no reason, practical, logistical, or otherwise, for a 96-year-old man who had spent 7 decades living under the full weight of royal protocol to remain at Buckingham Palace out of habit alone. So he didn't. He went to the place he had always loved, and Elizabeth came to him when her schedule allowed, which, according to those close to the couple, was more often than the press ever reported. Princess Anne addressed this directly on more than one occasion when the subject was raised. Her response was consistent and characteristically blunt. The arrangement was never a source of friction. It was a mutual decision made by 2 adults in their 90s who understood their own needs better than any newspaper editor in London. It was practical, it was respectful, and it was what both of them genuinely wanted. The royal biographer Robert Jobson, whose access to those in the couple's inner circle was extensive, confirmed that Wood Farm had served as a private retreat for Philip and Elizabeth for over 50 years before his retirement. This wasn't Philip fleeing to unfamiliar territory. He was returning to a place that had been part of their shared life since the 1960s. The tabloids framed it as a departure. It was in reality a homecoming. What the press consistently fails to understand about long marriages, and the royal marriage in particular, is that love does not stay the same shape across 73 years. It shifts, it adjusts, it finds new expressions that suit who both people have become, rather than demanding they remain who they were at the beginning. Love at 90 is not love at 30. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to work. Philip and Elizabeth had understood this since 1947. Separate bedrooms from the start, separate schedules when duty requires it, and finally separate residences, not because the connection had faded, but because honoring each other's needs had always been how they kept it intact. Wood Farm wasn't a symptom of a marriage in trouble. It was evidence of one that had lasted long enough to know exactly what it needed to survive. The last chapter, together again. March 2020. COVID-19 moves across Britain with terrifying speed. Within weeks, the country goes into lockdown. The hospitals fill. The government issues guidance for the elderly that is less a suggestion and more a warning: stay home, stay isolated, do not take risks. The virus is particularly brutal for people over 70. For people over 90, it is potentially a death sentence. Prince Philip is 98 years old. He is not in perfect health. There have been hospital stays in recent years and infection that kept him in for several days. A pre-existing heart condition serious enough to require surgery just months earlier in February 2021. His mobility has slowed. The man who once played polo
Park saw the Sporting Duke in action again in the polo field, and there wasn't a keener or more vigorous player on the field.
Who sailed competitively, who carried himself with the physical confidence of someone who had never questioned his own strength, that man is now 98 and fragile in ways he would never have admitted out loud. Wood Farm, isolated and quiet as it is no longer the right place. Philip moves to Windsor Castle, and for the first time in years, genuinely years, he and Elizabeth are living together full-time under the same roof. Royal biographers later called it HMS Bubble, a tight, carefully managed isolation with minimal staff, strict protocols, and almost no outside contact. Just the 2 of them and a small household team, sealed away from a world that was unraveling outside the castle walls. It was, in some ways, the most uninterrupted time they had spent together in decades. No state engagements are pulling Elizabeth away. No separate schedules, no separate residences. Just 2 people in their 90s in a castle, waiting out a pandemic together. Princess Anne has spoken about this period carefully, choosing her words with the precision of someone who feels it deeply, but does not want to express that feeling for an audience. She knew her father's health was declining. The hospital admissions in early 2021 made that undeniable.
Britain's Prince Philip has been taken to hospital in London. It's said to be a precautionary measure only.
His world had grown smaller, the long walks gone, the painting sessions shorter, and the energy that had always seemed inexhaustible finally running low. But he was with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth was with him. On April 9, 2021, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, died peacefully at Windsor Castle. He was 99 years old, just 2 months short of his centenary.
From Buckingham Palace that Prince Philip, the husband of Queen Elizabeth, has died at the age of 99.
The announcement came on a Friday morning, and the country stopped in a way it rarely does anymore. He had spent his final year exactly where he needed to be. The funeral that followed was unlike anything the royal family had experienced in living memory, not because of its scale, but because of its smallness. COVID restrictions meant that the congregation inside St. George's Chapel, Windsor, was capped at 30 people. Family members sat apart from each other, separated by the same rules that had kept the whole country at a distance from his loved ones for over a year. Elizabeth sat alone, a tiny figure in black, in a chapel that could hold 800 people, surrounded by 29 others in the wait of 73 years. The image went around the world. Most people who saw it said nothing for a moment. There was nothing to say. In the weeks that followed, Elizabeth flew by helicopter to Wood Farm. She stayed for several weeks.
Queen Elizabeth made a surprise visit to one of Prince Philip's favorite places over the weekend. The Queen was spotted paying a visit to her Sandringham estate in Norfolk, driving around Wood Farm,
The cottage where staff wore no uniforms, where she had cooked meals in the kitchen, Philip had redesigned, where she had washed dishes while the Queen of England, because at Wood Farm, the titles didn't matter, where his watercolor paintings still hung on the walls, exactly where he had placed them. She didn't go to Buckingham Palace to grieve. She didn't go to Windsor. She went to the place where he had been most fully himself, where the protocol fell away, and the real Philip lived, the one only people closest to him ever got to see. Wood Farm held something no palace could replicate. It held him in the ordinary, unhurried version of himself that Elizabeth had loved quietly for over 7 decades. Princess Anne said nothing publicly about those weeks her mother spent at the cottage. She didn't need to. Some grief doesn't require commentary. It just needs to be left alone, respected, and understood from a distance. She understood. She had always understood. Philip didn't stay away from Elizabeth because the marriage broke up. He stayed at Wood Farm because the marriage was strong enough to hold both of them, even when they weren't in the same building. Princess Anne knew this. She watched it from the inside. And when she finally spoke, this is what she wanted people to understand. 73 years, separate bedrooms since 1947, a retirement cottage in Norfolk, a pandemic bubble at Windsor, and a queen who flew to that cottage alone to grieve. That is not a story of distance. That is a love story, just not the kind you see in films. If this changed how you see Philip and Elizabeth, share this video. And if there's another royal story you want us to dig into, drop it in the comments. We read every single one.